A little historic polyamory for the Valentine's season on NES Works 161. Congratulations! You've made it through the autumn 1989 gauntlet of NES games based on external media properties with me. Well, almost. There's still one more title to go, an adaptation of the world's oldest novel.
No, this isn't a Muso based on the Epic of Gilgamesh. Koei hadn't quite gotten to that point yet. Although, that actually sounds like a pretty cool idea. No, this is Romance of the Three Kingdoms, a strategy game based on the novel by Luo Guangzhang, one of the first great written works in human history and a pillar of Chinese literature and pop culture. This makes Koei's game a cousin to other games based on the foundational Chinese novels, such as The Water Margin, think Suikoden, and Journey to the West, such as Dragon Power. Being about a period of political turmoil and warring feudal kingdoms, Romance made a perfect follow-up to Nobunaga's Ambition. For all intents and purposes, this is a sequel to that game. With Nobunaga's Ambition, Koei explored the Sengoku era. Here, we dive into the Sangoku era. This bit of wordplay probably didn't factor into Ko Shibusawa's decision to convert the complexities of romance into a video game, but that's why I would have done it, which I suppose is why he became wealthy beyond imagination with his video games and I run a barely known YouTube channel making stupid jokes about old video games. Still, it's pretty handy how Chinese history could so easily slot into the framework of Koei's breakout game. Like Nobunaga's, Romance began life as a laboriously detailed simulation strategy game for Japanese home computers before eventually making its way to every platform imaginable, including both NES and personal computers in the US. And while it certainly plays a lot like Nobunaga's Ambition, Romance isn't simply a Wheel of Fortune Junior Edition ROM hack that redraws the map of 16th century Japan to look like 2nd century China, tweaks the names and portraits of the warlords to fit the theme, and calls it a day. This is a proper sequel that brings with it some great quality of life features. The first you'll notice is the evocative soundtrack that accompanies play and shifts to new melodies and themes as you make your way through history. Romance's music was composed by none other than Yoko Kanno, as in Cowboy Bebop and Macross Plus and dozens of other all-time great anime and games, and from what I can tell, it was her first published work. Her music also appeared in the NES version of Nobunaga's Ambition, but this is where it all started. As you play, you'll also notice plenty of other differences, both small and large, that make this a deeper yet more accessible experience. For one thing, Romance offers 5 different play scenarios from the outset, each of which reflects a different period in the 35-year time span that the game covers, and also serves as a sort of difficulty selection. Well, not quite difficulty, more like complexity. Romance of the Three Kingdoms covers the half-century leading up to the actual Three Kingdoms era, in which 58 smaller nations were consolidated through conquest and politics into 3. Each scenario moves a few years ahead from the last and puts you in control of your choice of warlord and the consolidated territory that they controlled at that moment in history. The first scenario, AD 189's A Chaotic World, places you into the thick of China's most fragmented era, when the country we know today consisted of nearly 5 dozen independent kingdoms. On the other hand, AD 215's Age of the Three Kingdoms places you at the cusp of the Three Kingdoms age, where you control one of the 3 ultimately dominant warlords, with a small sliver of independent territory on the map, and have the chance to put those bastards Liu Bu and Cao Cao into their place once and for all, unifying China under your mighty fist, or whatever. Being set in China rather than Japan, Romance reflects the factors that played into Chinese history. Foremost among these is the Yangtze River, which plays a big part in naval warfare, particularly in the Battle of the Red Wall scenario, but also has a tendency to flood different kingdoms each spring, devastating the areas affected. Romance forces you to weigh that factor and many others into your quest for power. For example, do you develop land for cultivation, allowing you to grow your army and population by improving your harvest, but knowing that rice fields make your territory more susceptible to decimation by floods? Thankfully, you don't have to fumble blindly through these considerations. Romance gives you feedback in the form of high IQ generals who function as advisors, encouraging you to proceed while nudging you away from impetuous or useless choices. The game allows you to cancel an action based on their feedback. They'll even let you know if a negotiation or solicitation is likely to work, so that you don't waste a turn and a chunk of cash or marry off one of your beloved daughters trying to forge a political alliance with no potential of working out. Like Nobunaga's ambition, play proceeds by season, and each governor is allowed one action per season. Note that when I say governor, I don't mean the singular head of an alliance or province. Once consolidation begins, each territory under your control is allowed an action per turn. So in the AD 215 scenario, where you control a lot of different territories, you end up making a lot of decisions each season. There's a lot to keep in mind in this game, including the muster strength of each general, the loyalty of enemy generals to their master, and it's very much the kind of game that demands you take notes as you go. If you map something like Metroid on graph paper, you'll also want a spreadsheet or ledger to make notes on rival factions here. The chunky 36-page game manual offers a rundown of the 3 major warlords and their generals, but there are hundreds of other named characters with portraits here, and none of their stats or traits are documented. And that's not even getting into the strategy component of the game, the part in which you actually perform the act of conquest. This is an incredibly slow and involved game, one that demands many hours of time in order to complete a single scenario, and in which victory is hardly assured. It's pretty impressive to see these games on NES, even if they're limited by the 2-button controller and tragically low screen resolution. I mean, I have no aptitude for Koei's games myself, but I can certainly acknowledge when I'm in the presence of greatness. And hey, if the NES library could run the gamut from this to Back to the Future, the system must have been doing pretty alright for itself.
You can tell that NES Works is about the American version of the NES specifically. The giveaway this episode is that we're in October 1989, and the console is only now getting its second game based on soccer. Also, the fact that we're calling the sport soccer.
Americans have come around to European football these days, but back in the 1980s, it was very much the outsider sport compared to baseball, American football, basketball, and even ice hockey. Case in point, the only guy I knew who played league soccer back when I was in school was also the only person I ever knew who owned a Sega Master System. Soccer in America was a sport for contrarians, and that's reflected in the fact that the NES's second soccer game, after Nintendo's own excitingly named Soccer, took a full 4 years to arrive. Even Nintendo's Soccer was the unloved stepchild of the NES launch family. You'll recall that I whiffed my NES Works coverage of the game a decade ago, because Nintendo officially lists Soccer as a 1987 release, even though it's documented to have shown up at the console's New York test launch in 1985. Soccer, the sport, just couldn't catch a break in 1980s America. And now here's Tosei and Jalico to, well, they don't quite put things right, but we've got Goal. Goal belongs to the same sports series as Bases Loaded, Hoops, and Racket Attack, the Moero line. That's Moero as in burning, as in fiery spirits. I'm a little offended that Jalico screwed things up for me by not publishing Goal before Racket Attack, because if they'd switched those releases around, I could have carried forward the Valentine's theme by making a burning love joke. Oh well. Anyway, the thing that defines the Moero series since the beginning has been the way it pushes new frontiers for NES visuals to enhance the excitement of the sport. Bases Loaded had its hardball-like camera angle, Racket Attack had its low-angle camera perspective with active panning, and Hoops took a page from one-on-one with a close-in viewpoint of the court occupied by distinct-looking and playing characters. Goal attempts to carry forward that tradition by presenting the soccer pitch with, from what I can tell, is a totally unprecedented visual perspective for the sort. The soccer games we've seen to date on this channel have either oriented the field horizontally with the goals at either end, or vertically with the goals at the top and bottom. Goal does neither, instead tilting the camera perspective diagonally. It lays out the field at a 22.5 degree tilt, with the goals at the upper left and lower right. This allows for the pitch to feel as large as an actual soccer field, especially with its tiny player sprites. This is, based on my fairly casual research, the closest any console game had ever come to depicting the actual scale of the game. In theory, that's a pretty good idea. In practice, I'm not in love with it. The unusual angle makes the controls really weird for a start. The NES controller's diagonal pad can function as an 8-way input, which is to say that it recognizes input every 45 degrees. But since the camera tilts at half of that, I find it difficult to exert the level of fine control I'd like to over the action, especially goal kicks. I don't think the scale of the action does Goal any favors either, as it feels like your tiny little dudes really struggle to move around. Playing Goal reminds me of a sleep paralysis dream where you're trying to run but can't, except that you're ostensibly doing this for fun, rather than because your brain is mired in a nightmare. The real failing here is just, the gameplay. The tiny characters and weird controls could be workable if the moment-to-moment action felt better. Stuff like, control over your players and handling the ball, the little things. All 8-bit soccer games have to grapple with the fact that they depict a fast-paced team sport, where you have a lot of potential participants in the action and only 2 buttons with which to manage it all. Goal handles it worse than usual. Like a lot of soccer video games, it allows you to control a single player at a time while the rest run around under automation. A small arrow icon indicates the active team member under your direct supervision, and you can tap a button in order to switch control to a different player. Goal is really bad at this part. Usually a game will switch control to the team member nearest the ball, and they're often pretty good about activating a player ahead of the ball's current direction to help you get a jump on the opposing attacker. Goal does not do this. There appears to be no rhyme or reason behind the way it toggles controls, and you'll frequently find your active arrow icon pointing at someone no closer to the ball than when you started, and well behind the attacker's movements, even though multiple better candidates for control were present when the icon switched. Goal also requires you to hit the A button in order to make a defender swipe the ball from the opponent who controls it, but this is extremely unreliable, and half the time that you do manage to snag the ball, your newly ball-possessing character will read the A tap as a double press and send the ball sailing away in a different direction, immediately relinquishing control of it. On top of that, the actual handling of the players and the ball is pretty flighty, with characters changing direction by jumping erratically into new positions. The ball is even worse, sometimes snapping across a tile's worth of pixels in an instant. It's a shame that Goal falls down here because Tose certainly did put a lot of effort into the game. Reading through the manual, you'll discover that every player on a given team has their own stats, which does seem to be reflected on the field in gameplay, but I have no idea how you're meant to tell which tiny identical guy is supposed to be whom. Goal offers 2 modes of competitive play: the World Cup, which allows you to select one of 16 teams representing a different country, and the Tournament mode, which allows you to select one of 16 teams representing a different American city. But going by the manual, these amount to the exact same thing. Each city team shares player stats with a different country team. And then there's also Shootout mode, which is kind of like the soccer equivalent of Double Dragon's Mode B. You get a zoomed-in view of big characters doing something much more limited than usual, in this case trying to perform a goal kick. I don't know, I want to be positive here, but Goal doesn't work for me. There's more to Goal than, say, NES Soccer or Champion Soccer, but fundamentally its mechanics, controls, and performance don't improve on those games. Tose and Jalico tried to do something innovative here with the genre, but they didn't pull it off. When it comes to unconventional 8-bit takes on soccer, I'd rather just go with Captain Tsubasa, which abandons real-time controls altogether in favor of an RPG-like system that actually makes sense for managing a large group of players, like on a soccer team.
Next time on NES Works, the most expensive NES game in the world. Circa 1993, anyway.